Hello everyone, welcome back to our final season preview series video for the Central Division. It's another pre-recorded video. In today's video, we're talking about the St. Louis Blues and Winnipeg Jets. Blues who missed the playoffs, Jets who made the playoffs and exited early. We'll look at how these two teams did last year, we'll look at their offseason additions and losses, and we'll look at how they're shaping up heading into the 24-25 season. We'll go to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Dolan and Kahkonen channel. Before we get into this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support. We're here with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below and don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below so we can all discuss in this video. Now, in today's video, like I just said, talking about the Jets and the Blues, two teams who had interesting seasons last year. So we'll start over here with the Winnipeg Jets. Last year was a season to remember for the Jets, having a 52-24-6 record for 110 points. That was good enough for second in the Central Division, second in the entire Western Conference, and fourth in the NHL. So this team was a top-end team in the NHL last year. They had 259 goals for, which wasn't overly great. It was around average, 15th in the NHL, but they had 199 goals against, which was first in the NHL. They were the best defensive team in the entire NHL. Connor Hellebuyck having a Vezina-level season helped that, but this team was also really sound defensively. So really good things going for the Jets there this season. If they look at their point scoring leaders, not anyone who had a whole bunch of really good season when it comes to point scoring. Scheifele led the team with 72 points. No true surprise there. Josh Morris, he had another solid season, putting up 69 points. Pretty good for a defenseman. And then Nikolai Ehlers and Kyle Connor both had 61 points. So pretty good seasons there from those two as well. If you look at their goal scoring leaders, Kyle Connor also led the team with 34 goals. Not too surprised there. He's a really good goal scorer. And then Scheifele and Ehlers both were second on the team in goal scoring with 25. So it wasn't an overly great season goal scoring wise, as there wasn't that one big player who had a whole bunch of goals, but still, that was a pretty good solid season there from the Jets. On top of that, rookie Declan Chisholm, before being claimed off the waivers by Minnesota, was their point scoring leaders, having an assist in a couple of games for the Jets. So interesting note there. And then, like we just said, Jets went to the playoffs. They were the second seed in the Central Division, played the third seed, which was the Colorado Avalanche. And the first game was a really high scoring affair in which they won 7-6. It looked pretty good. And then they came completely crashing to a halt. Their offense could not find their legs, and their defense continued to give up 6+ goals almost every game. It was like a complete breakdown defensively for a team who was the best team defensively in the regular season. Completely broke down defensively in the playoffs. So wound up losing in 5 games in the round 1, and that was the season for the Jets. So after a really good regular season, one of the best probably I think in Jets history, they wound up losing in round 1, which wasn't overly good for the Jets. So interesting note there. If you look at their additions and losses from this past year, they did not do a whole bunch in the free agency this year. If you look at their additions, brought back David Gustafsson, Dylan DeMello, Colin Miller, Logan Stanley, and Ville Heinola. Most of them RFAs, Miller and DeMello UFAs, so they bring back some interesting players. Bring in depth forwards, Jared Anderson, Dolan and Mason Shaw, and I think 1-year deals. Bring in Hayden Fleury, who's a decent depth defenseman, on a 1-year deal, I think, too. They bring in Kahkonen and Eric Comrie in net. Comrie should be a solid third stringer. Kahkonen should be a really good backup for Hellebuyck, so interesting pickups there. If you look at their losses, they lose Christian Reichel, who's a UFA. He was a depth player, but they also lose Monahan and Toffoli, who fit in really well in the second line after being acquired at the trade deadline. So those are going to be big blows for the Jets. They also lose Brendan Dillon, who was a really good top 4 defenseman for that Jets team, so he's going to be a big blow. Also lose Artemi Kanazayev, who was a decent depth defenseman, so he's not going to be a huge blow. And then they also lose the goalies Laurent Brossoit and Colin Delia. Brossoit was the backup last year, Delia was the third stringer. So all in all, lose Brossoit and Delia, gain Kahkonen and Comrie. They do bring in a couple of depth pieces, but I think the losses of Monahan, Toffoli, and Dillon will hurt this team. So interesting note there. If you look at their trades, only made 2 trades this offseason. One was a small one with the Carolina Hurricanes, acquired Dylan Coughlin from Carolina for future considerations, so not too much of a surprise there. They didn't really need future considerations anymore, so they wound up moving it to the Carolina Hurricanes and get Coughlin, who's going to be a solid depth defenseman there. Could be a solid 6th, 7th guy for them. And then they also make the big trade that a lot of people were expecting. Rebecca McGrady, who did not want to be in Winnipeg anymore, was having contract disputes with the Jets, didn't want to sign his DLC with Winnipeg, wanted a fresh start, got a fresh start, as the Jets trade him to Pittsburgh in exchange for Brandon Yager, who I think in a year or two's time is going to be a fantastic top 6, potentially top 9 forward there for the Winnipeg Jets. So all in all, some pretty good trades there, but nothing really huge or something that's going to help them for this upcoming season. If they're the top 3 picks from this past year's draft, the first pick of their draft, at least for them, was Alfonso Freixo, who's a left shot defenseman, 2nd round, 37th overall. He was a pretty good player. Looks like eventually going to be a solid 2nd, 3rd pair of defensemen, so pretty good pickup there for the Jets. In the 4th round, 109th overall. They took Kevin He, who's a left winger, could eventually be a guy who challenges for like a fourth or third line role, so pretty good pickup there for the Jets. And they also get Marcus Leponin, who's a center, 5th round, 155th overall. Looks like a pretty good prospect too. I think eventually could be a solid third, fourth line center. So all in all, some pretty good pickups there from the Jets when it comes to their drafting. If you look at the two biggest questions, in my opinion, entering training camp, it's one, will Heinola be a top 4 defenseman? Like we talked about, they lost Brendan Dillon. There were a couple of other smaller pieces that they lost. They also bought out Nate Schmidt. That was another thing that they made this offseason. They didn't wind up keeping him. So Nate Schmidt's gone as the buyout candidate. So with Schmidt and Dillon gone, who are solid top 6 forwards, can Heinola work his way into a top 4? I think it's going to be interesting. Heinola's over the past couple of years been struggling to try and get himself into a consistent NHL role. Now I think there's a potential option here for him to sneak into a top 4 role. So will Heinola be a top 4 defenseman? That's going to be a big question. And 2, could Lucius or Lambert make the team? Both these two guys are really good. They had pretty good seasons over in the AHL last year. They just could definitely get some more youth into this team. So could one of those two guys wind up making the NHL debuts this year and be able to be a consistent NHL players? I think it's possible. So we're going to have to wait and see. But the two biggest questions, in my opinion, for the Jets entering training camp is 1, will Heinola be a top 4 defenseman this year? And 2, can one of Lucius or Lambert or both wind up making the team this year? So I'll be interested in it there. Next, going over to my projected lineup for this team for the 24-25 season. Now, as it's right now, I have Kyle Connor playing on line 1 with Mark Scheifele and Gabe Vilardi. I have Nikolai Ehlers on line 2 with Cole Perfetti once he signs his new extension, and Brad Lambert. On line 3, I have Mason Appleton with Adam Lowry and Nino Niederreiter. And on line 4, I have Vladislav Nemesnikov with Alex Iafallo and Rasmus Kupari. On the defensive end, I have Josh Morrissey and Dylan DeMello. I have Heinola with Pionk on pair 2, and I have Sandberg with Miller on pair 3. I have Baron, Jared Anderson, Dolan, and Logan Stanley being the 3 spares, and I have Hellebuyck being the starter with Kahkonen being the backup. That would be a cap-compliant roster so long as the Cole Perfetti extension comes in at under $6.5 million. So that'll be a pretty good pickup there for the Jets. Meanwhile, if I look at my prediction for the Jets for this upcoming season, I don't have them doing too good. I know that they were one of the best teams in the West last year, the best defensive team in the league last year, and we're a pretty good team, but I don't like what they did in the offseason. That they didn't really get a whole bunch better. I mean, they replaced the goaltending, but really didn't do a whole bunch other than that. I mean, they got Coughlin and Fleury to replace Dillon. They got some depth pieces to replace Monahan and Toffoli. Like, I don't really like what they did this offseason, so I'm going to say they take a major step back and they missed the playoffs. Now, I think as much as they didn't do overly bad, teams like Utah got a whole bunch better. Seattle got a whole bunch better. Minnesota got a little bit better as well. I mean, LA got a bit better probably too. So they got a lot of players behind them who got a whole bunch better. So I think Winnipeg's going to have a tough time making the playoffs this year. So at this point, I have the Jets finishing with 87 points. That's 23 lower than last year, and that's to have a playoff spot. I only have them missing by 6, so I could say maybe sneak into a playoff spot too. But at this point in time, I think the Jets will take enough of a step back that they do wind up missing the playoffs. So I'm not going to say they're going to do a horrible job, but I do think they're going to take enough of a step back to miss the playoffs. So at this point in time, I have the Jets finishing the season with 87 points, 23 lower than last year, and out of a playoff spot. So that's my predictions for the Jets for this upcoming season. If I get through this team can improve. 1, they need Hellebuyck to replicate the season from last year. I think the last time Hellebuyck won a Vezina, the year after, his numbers went pretty much down. What you'd expect after a Vezina season. But if he can replicate that Vezina season next year, just going to have a really good chance to not only make the playoffs, but be a top 3 team again in the Central Division. 2, need better offense. As we said, they were a mediocre team offensively last year. They need more offense. Didn't really get anyone in the free agency market or in trades to really help them improve that. So they're going to need some guys to step up. Like, can Ehlers step up? Can Scheifele? Can Vilardi? Can Perfetti? Can Niederreiter? Like, they need these guys to step up and produce a whole bunch more. So they need better offense than they had last year. And 3 is the young players need to grow. This team has a couple of young players. Like, Perfetti's a young player. I think that there's a couple of other younger guys who come up, like Lambert, like Heinola. Sandberg's pretty young. They also have a couple of other younger guys. Like Vilardi's also another guy who's pretty young. So if they can have these younger guys continue to take steps and grow next year, I think this Jets team could be a really good team. So in my opinion, 3 is this team can improve is 1, Hellebuyck replicates last year's stats. 2, they have a better offense, and 3, the younger guys continue to grow. And lastly, going over to my rating for the Jets for this offseason. Now, if you look at their offseason additions, losses, trades, draft picks, didn't do overly bad, but I gotta say it didn't get a whole bunch better either. I mean, the forward group got a little bit worse, especially with the losses of Monahan and Toffoli. The defense didn't look overly great, especially with the losses of Dillon and Schmidt. Goaltending-wise, they're probably the same, maybe a little bit better with Kahkonen as backup. They wound up moving on from McGrady, and as much as he didn't want to play for the Jets, he was a player who could have made an impact now. For the Jets, Yager's not going to be there this year, so in my opinion, I'm going to give them a D rating. I don't think it's too surprising as of right now. I think they had a decent offseason, made some alright moves, but they didn't really do a whole bunch that I thought they would have, especially after the season they had last year. So in my opinion, a little bit surprised they didn't do more. Going over to the St. Louis Blues. Next up, going over to the St. Louis Blues. The Blues last year had a fantastic season, at least the finish to the season. The start wasn't overly good, fired their head coach, brought on Drew Bannister as their interim head coach. Did alright with Drew Bannister, finished with a record of 43, 33, and 6 for 92 points. 5th in the Central Division, 9th in the Western Conference, 16th in the NHL. So quite surprisingly, they were in a playoff spot. If you go to the top 16 teams to make the playoffs in the NHL, they were ahead of the Washington Capitals last year. So if they were in the Eastern Conference, this team would have made the playoffs. But they were in the Western Conference, where the playoff bar was 98 points, not 91. So the Blues wound up missing the playoffs. Last year had 239 goals for, which was 24th in the NHL, so they were a horrible goal-scoring team. The goals against wasn't overly bad. They were average, 14th in the NHL with 250 goals against, so it wasn't an overly bad season on the defensive side, but goal-scoring was a whole different story there for the Blues. If you look at their point scoring leaders, Robert Thomas led the team with 86 points. Not too surprised there. He had a fantastic season, followed by Jordan Kyrou, who had 67, and Pavel Buchnevich, who had 63. If you look at the goal-scoring leaders, Kyrou was the team leader with 31 goals, followed by Buchnevich and Neighbors, who both had 27. If you look at the rookie scoring leader, it was Scott Peronovich, who had 17 assists last year, so he looked pretty good. That was a pretty good bright spot there for the Blues. So they had a couple of bright spots, especially Thomas with 86 points. But this team did wind up missing the playoffs in the Western Conference, even if they got really close and were right there until the end. So interesting note there. And if you look at their additions and losses from this past year's offseason, it's not an overly long list here for the St. Louis Blues. If you look at the players that they brought in, they brought back Kasperi Kapanen and Scott Peronovich, two interesting players. Kapanen bomb 6'4", Peronovich could be eventually solved top 4 defenseman. And then they also bring in Dylan Holloway via an offer sheet and Philip Broberg via an offer sheet. They utilize the offer sheets. They wind up going after Holloway and Broberg for Edmonton, get both of them. So you do have to move off a 2nd and 3rd round pick to acquire both those guys. But still, those are going to be some really good young players to add to their lineup there for this upcoming season. They also had Ryan Studer on a 1-year deal, Pierre-Oliver Joseph on a 1-year deal, and Corey Schumann on I think a 1 or 2-year deal. So interesting note there. They extend Pavel Buchnevich, who's been a really good player for them ever since being acquired from New York. He gets I think a 6-year deal with AAV of $8 million. They'll be in the start of next year, so that's a pretty good pickup there. And if you look at their losses, not a whole bunch of losses. I mean, they lost Sammy Blais to a PTO to Vancouver, Jacob Vrana to a PTO to Washington, Marco Scandella, who's currently UFA, and Callie Rosen, who went to Colorado. So not a whole bunch of losses here. They made 5 trades that weren't pick-for-pick swaps, but future considerations were a theme for the St. Louis Blues. First was a deal that did not involve future considerations. They traded their 2025 4th round pick to the Jackets in exchange for Alex Texier, signed him promptly afterwards. Should be a solid 3rd line, maybe 4th line forward there for the Blues this year, so pretty good pickup there. Then they traded Kevin Hayes and a 2025 2nd round pick, the St. Louis Blues, to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for future considerations. So move a 2nd round pick to offload the Kevin Hayes contract, move that to Pittsburgh, so interesting note there. They then flipped future considerations to the Dallas Stars in exchange for acquiring Radek Faksa. So made good use of future considerations there, and they wound up acquiring Radek Faksa. That was a pretty good move there. Faksa is a solid 4th line center, should be able to help that team out, so interesting note there. They then also had an extra future considerations, so they moved that future considerations to the Ottawa Senators and acquired Mathieu Joseph in a 2025 3rd round pick. So the Sens really didn't want Joseph in a 3rd rounder anymore, so they were able to move future considerations to get those 2 things. So Joseph's going to be a solid middle 6 forward, and they get another draft pick. And then they felt the need of future considerations back, so they wound up moving Paul Fisher, who was a decent prospect defenseman for the Blues, and a 2028 3rd round pick to the Edmonton Oilers to get future considerations back from Edmonton. So they're able to get another future considerations, which is a huge piece for the St. Louis Blues this offseason. I mean, look at it. There were 4 trades involving future considerations, so that was a big piece of the Blues offseason. But all joking aside, pretty good moves there from the Blues. I mean, I think they lost the Fisher one and the Hayes one, but they do win the Faksa and the Joseph one, and I think they do get a really good player here in Texier. So interesting note there. If they're top 3 picks in this past year's draft. In the first round, they took right shot defenseman Adam Yurchik in the 16th overall slot. Really good pickup there. Yurchik should eventually be a solid top 4 defenseman. In the second round, they had 2 picks, 48 and 56. 48th, they took Colin Ralph, and in 56th position, they took Lucas Fischer. Both are left shot defensemen, and I think he'll have a shot eventually to be a solid second or third pair of defensemen, so interesting note there. But they definitely had a couple of decent draft picks and made do with a lot of them. The 2 biggest questions, in my opinion, is 1, who's on the blue line? We talked about this a little while ago. They have, I think, 8 or 9 players who could potentially be on the Blues blue line. So which guys wind up making the blue line this year? Does Suter, does Tucker, does Kessel, does Peronovich, does Broberg, there's a lot of interesting pieces here for the Blues to see who they wind up making on the roster, so that'll be an interesting thing to watch out for. And then also, will Bolduc, Zach Dean, or Dalibor Dvorsky want to make the team? All 3 are really good forward prospects. Bolduc got a little bit of a stint last year, show his potential for the St. Louis Blues. Dean and Dvorsky haven't, I think, played at NHL level yet in their careers, but they both look like they're going to be really good future top 6 forwards there for the Blues. So I do wonder if any of those guys want to make the team this year. But those are 2 biggest questions in my opinion. Is 1, who's on the blue line for the Blues this upcoming season? And 2, will Bolduc, Dean, or Dvorsky make the team? So I'll be interested to note. If I look at my projected lineup for the Blues for this upcoming 24-25 season, at this point in time, I brought in Saad playing on the top line with Thomas and Kyrou. I have Zachary Bolduc making the team on the second line, playing with Brayden Schenn and Pavel Buchnevich. I have Jake Neighbors playing on line 3 with Alex Texier and Dylan Holloway. And I have Mathieu Joseph on line 4 with Radek Faksa and Alexei Toropchenko. So that's a pretty good forward group. Defensively, I have Philip Broberg playing with Colin Parayko. I have Nick Leddy playing with Justin Falk, and Scott Peronovich playing with Pierre-Oliver Joseph. That's a pretty good defensive core. On the goaltending side, I have Binnington playing with Hofer. Binnington is starter, Hofer the backup. I have Kapanen, Sundqvist, and Suter, the 3 spares, and I have Torrey Krug starting the season on injuries reserve. He's going to miss the entirety of the season next year due to injuries, and that would be a cap-compliant roster for the St. Louis Blues. So it's a pretty good lineup there for the Blues, and I think they did really good. If you look at my current projected point total for the Blues for this upcoming season, at current point in time, I have the Blues doing a little bit worse than last year. Not a whole bunch, but I do still have them missing the playoffs. I just think there are too many really good teams above them for them to leapfrog any of them. So at this point in time, I have them finishing with 85 points, 7 lower than last year, still above 500 record, and not too far away from the playoffs, only missing by 8, which is around the same amount as they missed this year. But still, I think the Blues are going to be a really good team next year, and I still think they're going to be really hard out, but I do think they're going to be just on the outside looking in with 85 points, 7 lower than last year, and missing the playoffs by 8. So interesting note there. Going over to 3 ways I can see this team improve to get better for next year. 1, they need better offense. We saw it last year, 24th in the NHL in scoring. Awful offense last year. As much as guys like Thomas, Buchnevich, and Kyrou had really good seasons, besides that, there was no offense for that team. So they need some more offensive improvements this year. Their additions like Holloway, Texier, Joseph, they need them to do really good this year, and they need some of the guys who they already have to take steps forward. It's interesting note there. 2, they need to get younger. This team is an older team, so getting some more youth into this team is really going to be an important thing for them. Like we said, Peronovich should potentially have a full season this year. Broberg should potentially be a really good fit there. Like we said, Holloway's a little bit younger, Texas is a little bit younger. I have Bolduc making the team, which is a good young player. Thomas and Kyrou are still on the younger side of things, so if they can have some of these younger guys continue to get into the lineup, I think they could be really good. And 3 is the solid defense. Like we said, last couple of years haven't been overly great defensively, so hopefully the additions and moves that they made, like they got rid of Torrey Krug right now because he's injured. They have Broberg in the lineup now. They could have Pierre-Oliver Joseph or Ryan Suter in the lineup as well. Could these sort of additions help this team be a little bit more defensive than they were last year? We're going to have to wait and see. But in my opinion, 3 is this team can improve as 1, better offense than last year, 2, get younger, and 3, they need to still have a solid defense this year. So that's my opinion on the Blues. And lastly, going over to my current offseason rating for the Blues for this past season. Now for the Blues, like we said, some of the bigger things they did this year was adding Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg. They add Alex Texier, Radek Faksa, Mathieu Joseph, move on from Kevin Hayes, Jacob Vrana, and Marco Scandella. So all in all, not bad offseason. At the very beginning, I was really concerned. I was going to give them somewhere close to what the Jets rating was, but I think after the moves, like the off-season things, I'm going to give them a B-. I think that's sort of warranted for what they did this offseason. Got a little bit younger, got a little bit better on the defensive end, and I think this team is going to be a little bit more scarier this year to play against. So I think a B- rating is warranted for how they did this year. But definitely, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Jets and the Blues down in the comment section below. That's what I'm going to talk for today. Do you think that the Jets had a pretty good season last year, and even though they missed the playoffs, the Blues too, what do you think about their off seasons, and do you agree with my predictions for the team's lineups and my predictions for the team's point totals for this upcoming season? Definitely left your guys' thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So I'm going to for today. I'm going to this video. If you'd like to subscribe down below. Thank you for all your support with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below so you can also discuss in this video. Also a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis. If that's, so check that out. The link down in the description below. And can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.